Here, take mine.
Call this,
Take mine, I was too tight.
call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Roll call, please.
You haven't been on all morning.
Mr. Arsenal?
Here.
Ms. Barbara?
Here.
Ms. Campbell? Present. Ms. Kankakee? Mr. Legere? Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Shaw?
Present.
Mrs. Stockburg?
Present.
Mr. Washington?
Here.
Mr. Bassett?
Here.
Thank you.
This is important. Mr. Witt, my microphone isn't working.
What's new?
Come on.
Turn around.
Turn them on.
That might not be a bad idea.
Can you turn the lights off in there?
Somebody did. No tray.
Go up and blow in it.
There you go.
There we go.
Take my job away from me.
For a guy who doesn't have a union card, you do a good job. Roll call, please.
We did that.
Just did that. Just because the mic wasn't on, that don't mean we didn't do it.
Don't take him any meetings, it's too much for Bill.
See you in a moment.
I didn't hear say we had a quorum. We do. Going on, public comment, we have none. Approval of minutes, we haven't received those. County Auditor's Office, the claims.
Cold.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right. Claims for the month of December 2008. Highway Fund, $46,583.87. Highway Other Funds, $473,145.03, for a total of $519,728.90.
Is there a motion? Moved by Mr. Shaw, second by Mr. Stoffer. Any discussion? All in favor?
Roll call.
I was just gonna say. We have nobody to call roll.
It's Christmas time.
Okay,
Microphone.
great.
Mr. Arsenal?
Yes.
Ms. Barber? Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Stauffenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Forgot me.
Forgot Mr. Bassett.
Mr. Bossert?
Aye.
Motion still carried.
General Fund, $1,200,517.81. Special Funds, $4,179,987.76, for a total of $5,380,505.57.
Is there a motion? Moved by Mr. Washington. Seconded by. These French names. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Roll call.
I wasn't gonna help him.
Roll call.
I was waiting.
Earth to Christine. Roll call.
Olthoff? Mr. Olthoff?
I go last.
Oh, okay. Mr. Arsenal?
Aye.
Ms. Barber? Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Stauffenberg?
Aye.
Ms. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Bassett?
Aye.
Mr. Olthoff?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay,
And last, we have county board payroll from October 15th through November 30th. This finishes out fiscal year 2008. Total meetings, 137. Per diems, 8,768. Mileage, 1,180, for a total of $9,948.
Move we pay.
Moved by Mr. Stauffenberg, second by Mr. Washington. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed?
Monday.
Roll call.
Mr. Arsenault?
Aye.
Ms. Barbara? Aye. Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Ms. Lear?
Aye.
Ms. Strong?
Aye.
Ms. Stauffenberg?
Aye.
Ms. Washington?
Aye.
Ms. Bossert?
Aye.
Ms. Oldham?
Aye.
Thank you.
Carried.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
There are 3 sheets to sign. Going on to the insurance. Is there any insurance?
I don't believe.
No.
I have a question.
Question, Mr. Stauffenberg.
Do we have any idea how many switched to PPO, so what our premium is? Maybe Steve might know, I don't know. Don't know, okay. I was just curious.
Those of us on PPO are appreciative of the reduction in premium.
Right, that's why I wanted to know, it will help the county too, so I wondered what it turned out to be. So, if I could get a number sometime, how many switched?
Put that down. Maybe I could use some options like that. How many switch to PPO? How much saving the county? Okay. All right. Going on to county treasurer.
I was just telling Todd, I know he's the new kid on the block. I really don't have anything to report at this time.
No money?
Nope, no money. All the money's gone. It's all been distributed. Now we gotta make our way through the winter months. Working with Steve and...
Putting up resumes?
So if you have any specific questions, Todd, I know he'll come and see me at the beginning of the year, and I'll explain everything, what we do. Anybody have any specific questions? It's pretty quiet.
You get off easy.
This is for me. Just approve the report. We need approval of the report. County treasurer's monthly report.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Washington, second by Mr. Lear. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Small.
Yep.
County collectors report. We did that.
No, we just did the treasurer.
We did the treasurer's. County
moved.
collectors. Moved by Mr. Stauffenberg, second by Mr. Washington. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Monthly resolutions.
Todd, the monthly resolutions are the ones where we have our trustee auction where we get deed to the property, and then we sell the property at an auction. And these resolutions are for those individuals that have gotten deed to the property. We quit claiming to them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Motion to
So
approve
moved.
by Mr. Stauffenberg, second by Mr. Washington. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Finance Department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Financial update discussion.
morning. I saved a few trees today, didn't bring anything. I thought my Christmas present would be you don't have to listen to me very long today. But I've got to say something, so, I too, we're in the middle of closing out fiscal year 08, and I didn't feel we're far enough along to really start bringing a lot more detail. I should be able to bring that next month, give you an idea of where we're at. We're entering the 09 detailed budget for all funds, general fund, grants. We're missing about 4 departments, so we're doing pretty good right now, but we still have some deadlines so we can get that detailed report out. Is there any, I thought, like Mark, is there any questions, anybody had thought of or information? I know there's, some other new things going on. Anybody have any questions before I start in on just some miscellaneous things? No questions.
The sales tax revenue and income tax revenue, is there any significant change in those trends?
Not right now. Kind of holding our own at this point. Yeah, once again, I'll bring more of that detailed information beginning next month. As Mark alluded to, with the tax distributions finished, I went in and kind of estimated some big picture stuff. I find this interesting. Some of you may or may not. But as this is all as of November 30th, but right now we're dealing in approximately 4.4 million in total accounts receivable, all in general fund. That would include grants and everything. As far as cash equivalent, as of November 30th, the state owes us approximately 1.3 million at this time, and 2 months of the inmate program is about 1.7 million. Although now it's down to about 800,000, so it's equivalent about 2 months there. We get it about every 45 days, so about middle of the month, the previous month comes in. All of them, total. So they're all paying. It's just the way that that cycles through those numbers. So at any given time, we're anywhere between 2.8 to 3.3 million in cash equivalent in the general fund. So when we talk about this time of year coming up, we got 3 payrolls in January, which is probably going to put us behind the 8 ball to get through, all the way through tax distribution. So we do rely heavily on the inmate monies flowing regularly, sales tax, income tax, which income tax gets delayed, and the other taxes. So, the state does put a crimp on our, on trying to keep cash flow going. There's no doubt about that. So, that's just an update of what a glimpse of, what the picture looks like when we stop the fiscal year. But that's no different than looking at it on a regular monthly basis, as far as timing and things, when they show up. So, obviously, we wouldn't be talking about having trouble making payrolls and stuff if we had, even half of, the $3 million, in the bank instead of it sitting out in somebody else's bank. So, just a FYI there. So, like I said, we'll go into more detail. The only things that I've had some conversations about that may or may not affect as we go forward. One, just listening to parts of the last committee meeting, just a heads up on that delegation agreement that there's no budget for the local match in the 09 budget at this time. So it's I don't know how the flow is going to happen with that once it comes back, or if it's going to make it to this committee at all. But there's no budget for that local match, which means technically it would come from contingency potentially. I did get a phone call from Bruce asking how much was in contingency, because if we have a special election, as what's being debated at the state level right now, and if there's no funding source, I don't know dollar-wise, he wasn't exactly sure, but when I told him 400,000, he was, well, that might might do, you know, well, that's all we got. You know, as we talked about, we brought it down, distributed it. You know, 9 is extremely tight, especially if we have to do, you know, a special election. So, just, you know, just a reminder, you know, a heads up as new things, you know, start making their way through. You know, the budget is tight. You know, the other part to that, with budget being tight, we're gonna be talking about year-end fund balance, as we did during the budget process, and then cash. You're gonna hear a lot of different things in the next couple of months as far as, you know, good things and bad things. I'll try to keep it as clear as I can and how it relates to each other. But, you know, we could be talking about interfund borrowing and at the same meeting be talking about how our general fund balance went up by X amount of, you know, hundreds of thousands in 08. And then we'll remind you where that cash is, you know what I mean? That doesn't mean it's in the bank, you know, and that's the tough part about how all this flows. And you know, talking to the various department heads and board members, when bits and pieces come out, you know, everybody wants to grab that, so let's do this or do that with it. And, you know, that big picture and how everything flows is so critical, you know, I mean, keeping everything balanced around here. So we'll try to keep that in perspective, but what's hard is, as busy as we are in the office, I don't really, I could try to make time, but I don't really have time to go to every single committee to know if it's coming back here, if it's not coming back here. So, you know, I guess, you know, how everything's gonna flow and make sure everything's prioritized with what is budgeted and where everything's at is probably gonna be pretty critical as we go forward here, because I didn't put it together, but I can tell you that the flow from when we budgeted and a lot of the interdepartmental fees and fines have gone down in trend even since the budget time when we were looking at it back in August, September, even as late as October, has still declined. So we have a lot of local fee fine structures within you know, various departments for various reasons still declining. So you know, we'll keep a close eye on that. The ones that are keeping us afloat are that sales tax hasn't changed, at least at this point. You know, the inmate program, the bigger ones are keeping us afloat right now, but we have to keep in mind those little ones are still dropping. They're important, but they are still dropping. So, you know, when new things come up, you know, I think we need to take a really hard look, because we're still, even though we're talking about potential good news for a big picture, you know, new programs and stuff create a cash flow situation. You know, the states, you know, we're 6-7 months behind in a lot of the reimbursements from the state at this point. That's how long we're cash flowing certain programs. So, you know, I think we have to take a different look at it besides budget, in the sense of how is it going to affect cash flow, which is a whole different discussion than is it in the budget. So just some heads up. Didn't really want to be the bearing of bad news 2 days before Christmas or anything, but it is something as we head into fiscal year 09 that we definitely have to keep, you know, in mind. And you know, again, you know, how that's going to flow and you know, how it's going to make it, if things are going to make it back to this committee or not, as we go forward here. So anyway, that's just a brief update that I had. You know, if there's any questions now or not, but not, wish everybody a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Steve.
Mr. Whitty.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. McCarty, you said that there may not be no money for a delegation agreement. You didn't say there wasn't. There may not be. But at the same time, the public defender and the state's attorney, I believe, is moving over to the bank building. Are they going to have money to make that move?
Well, I wasn't trying to say give a yes or no to the delegation agreement. I was simply just saying that it's not budgeted. So as if this gets approved and it comes on board and we get started, the local match is not in the budget. Is all I was basically reminding the board. So it doesn't mean you can't. It just means it's
but what I'm asking is the public defender and the state's attorney is planning on moving over to the bank building. Do they still have money to do that? Or is that coming out of contingency?
well, I don't know if that's been identified. I don't know if it's come to before a committee yet or not. I've just heard bits and pieces about that. And again, my question is, you know, again, the cash flow of starting something new, you know what I mean, is where I'm bringing that up to the committee. I'm sure there's a lot of ideas going out right now and different things and needs and wants, but.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
I don't really have a question. I think that we as the finance committee and the board in general, people have got to realize that a budget is an estimate. It's basically a guesstimate, and so are your incomes. We need to take that into consideration before we vote for something. Just because it's in the budget doesn't mean it's there. And I think too many people have a thing that say, well, it's in the budget. That's fine. But I mean, due to the economic times that we're in and the state that the state of Illinois is in right at this moment, we don't know how funds are going to be released or if they are. And I really think that we should really stop and think before we start anything new. I mean, we need to keep the status quo. How do you know what sales tax is going to be? They say this is a miserable shopping season, so, I mean, you know, December sales tax is generally one of the biggest that a community gets, municipalities or counties. I just think we need to hold back.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you. Going on to other business, redeploy Illinois grant.
That would be the probation department.
You're always on probation.
Good morning. For a refresher, the redeploy program, we brought this to our judicial committee and informed them of that. And we have been directed to come here today, kind of fill you in on what's going on. This is a grant that has become available. Essentially, what's happened, and I'll be as brief as I can. Throughout the state of Illinois, obviously, youth and communities and counties are committed to the Illinois Department of Corrections. The numbers of commitments to the Department of Corrections prison for juveniles has been increasing over the years, obviously. So what the people did in Springfield was they said, maybe we should take some of that money from the Department of Corrections and funnel it down to the local communities to see if we can do interventions with youth in the community-based agencies. So this money has been pulled and set aside, and they did 5 pilot counties, was it 5? 4 pilot counties beginning in like 2005. Those counties are still up and running, and the money and the funding is still going there. About 8-9 months ago, they came to Kankakee County and asked if we could compile a survey, and we were one of the counties that participated in this survey to see if we were going to be eligible for this money, and in fact we were. My staff, this is Grace Segerbrook, the juvenile division supervisor for me, and her staff went through hundreds of files and isolated the data that they were seeking for this survey. As a result of that, the amount of commitments that the state of Illinois redeploy program is asking is that we reduce our commitment rate to the Department of Corrections here in Kankakee County by 25%, which for us would be about 8 minors on an annual basis. The money that they're proposing to send to us is approximately $200,000 on an annualized basis. We're looking to get started as soon as we get a contract from them here in the next week or so. Actually, we've been waiting for the contract about a month. So they're delaying, and we don't know what's up with that. The last information that we received was that the Department of Human Services is now reviewing those grant applications and contracts, and that they're supposed to be coming our way. So we don't know if something's going on with the money at the state with regards to the funding of that. So the money that they're proposing to send to us, again on an annualized basis, is about $214,000, and we are in place with regards to starting this program. We have got numerous agency people lined up. The grant would come in, the grant money would come in, and we would use that money to pay for services, for consulting, for assessments, for interventions, not only with youth, but with their families. And this is a very intensive intervention with the families should the court determine that they want to refer a kid for redeploy. So that's pretty much it. The issue at this time is we're waiting for the contract, and we also are aware that possibly the money could be delayed coming, which is what we've all heard here about the state and their funding mechanisms. And so in discussion with Chief Judge Erickson at the time, we're proposing that we possibly could utilize probation fees from our probation fees account to front the money for this grant, and then when the money comes in, we would then reimburse that account back. We've run into some other issues with regards to the person that we need to hire to coordinate this. With regards to, we've been in contact with Steve and his staff, and Nicole, who prepares grants, and there's some technicalities with regards to personal liability of this person working out of our office as a coordinator, so we're trying to do the best we can with that. I don't know, Steve, if you have anything you'd like to add. But that's pretty much it. The grant is all in line. We're waiting to get the contract, and the reason why we're bringing it here is we're here to inform the Finance Committee that the money issue is a in and out scenario. But when we get a grant, the chairman of the board obviously has to sign off that as a fiscal agent, Kankakee County is responsible for running this money in and out and auditing it.
Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You say 210,000, 215 as a grant. Is that a matching fund? So the county would not have to put up any funds.
The only thing that we're doing is providing space for the coordinator out of our office.
All right. The other question I have is pertaining to this coordinator hiring an additional personnel. That would that come out of your budget, or would that be additional cost?
The grant funds that.
The grant funds that.
The grant is funding everything for this position and for the agencies and for the purchase of services from all these interventions that are going to go on. Grace, you want to say something?
From what you have seen, is there any sunset date on these grants, or is it?
The grants that were applied for and activated for the 4 other counties are still in place, and they're still receiving their money.
Thank
Steve?
One thing I might add, Rick, that we talked about was a sunsetting situation. I think we have to look at that for every grant. What happens to the program? Is the state requiring that this program continue, or can this just stop? You know, the funding stops, the program stops. That's one thing that I believe that the board in the process has to take a very hard look at, because there are, in the fine print, where you have to continue some grants, and that is where your cost a lot of times comes in when that funding stops.
In the past, and I appreciate that, Stephen, with the financial position we're all in here, we know that. In the past, we've asked for additional probation officers through grants because of specific programs. This position, we're not asking for a probation officer. We're asking to utilize the money from the grant. They worked hard to delineate that a person will be paid by the grant money, a coordinator. The monies will be paid for services. We're going to use money to purchase tokens for the people to ride buses if they have transportation issues, and it goes on and on and on. But we're not looking to utilize any money from the county or my budget, and we're not looking to, at this time, to add any additional staff to the probation department. This is a grant-funded thing, It's totally by the grant, and our position would be, you know, if it looks like the grant funding is going to go away, my job is to bring it back here and present it to you, tell you whether the program is being successful, which we believe it will be, and make the decision at that time. But there is no requirement of that.
Rick, you might explain the language in the grant concerning the mandatory reduction in,
Sure.
commitments to the system.
I'll let Grace, she's a little more involved with that.
There is a 25% reduction that is mandatory. If we do not meet that requirement, which I believe we will be able to, we do have to have some monetary payback. That will not come in the form of us actually giving money back, but it will come in the form of a reduction of monies received to us from the state of Illinois. If we go over, we can have 22 commitments. That's what our number, our magic number is for the next year. If we have more than that, it is $4,000 per child over the 22 for a full commitment to the Department of Juvenile Justice. So it won't actually be money going back out, but a reduction of money received in.
You know what? Because we've got the grant money coming in. Excuse me. Because the grant. Go ahead, Steve.
I got a question. Sorry. What's that? What if there's the what if in the grant? What could that cost us? Did you guys do a what if of, if worst case scenario, what that revenue change would be?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Steve.
If we go over, you mean?
If you do not have a reduction in the number of juveniles committed.
$4,000 per child over the 22 commitments.
Does that? Oh, with the comment that you made previously, though, when you go over and it's going to cost money, it comes out of the grant. It's not a money out of our pocket.
No. It's a reduction in the grant payment.
Going forward. There are a couple of exceptions. If a child has a Class X felony, those numbers do not count against us. They are not even eligible to be a part of the redeploy program. So if we had a huge rash of, let's say, aggravated criminal sexual assaults that we get this next year and they get committed to the Department of Juvenile Justice, those numbers will not count against us. We have to take all Class X felonies out of the mix at the very beginning. Or if they're transferred to the adult court, that number does not count against us.
Mr. Chairman? I'm listening to this and suddenly putting some pieces together. Is it correct that we've gone through a period where there's been a declining crime rate? And if I may follow through on that, with the current economic hard times that we're seeing, is it not also true that there's a reasonable expectation that the crime rate may go up simply because of economic hard times? Do we know what kind of risk is involved because of those two factors?
One of the things that I can say is that there is an oversight board for redeploy. They have, no one has ever gone over their number, just to let you know. Out of the last 4 years, everyone has had a reduction, and the board is willing to work with us. They do not have to impose the $4,000 grant. They can go down to $1 if they so desire. They will work with you if, they said to us when we, because there was a question we asked them when we first went to the meetings, if we have a huge onslaught of cases, they will work with us to adjust our number upward if need be. So that is something, because everybody has that concern, believe you me.
If I could real quick, the pilot sites that are currently operating under redeploy are Macon County, that's Decatur, Peoria County, St. Clair County, and the 2nd Judicial Circuit, which is comprised of numerous counties down in the 2nd Judicial Circuit, Crawford, Edwards, Franklin, Hamilton, Hardin, Jefferson, and those counties down there. And this is an annual report that I received from them, and this was as of 2005 is when the pilot programs began.
Is there a motion to approve the grant? Moved by Mr. Scholl, seconded by Mr. Washington. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Going on to the township multiplier, Mr. Beatty.
Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
I should explain, comment came up at the last full board meeting about some explanation concerning the township multiplier. Mr. Beatty came to the Community Services Committee last week and did a little presentation on the how for and how this works. And we asked him to repeat this here at Finance. That way we're going to catch most of the board in that process. So,
thank you.
Well, it appears the Finance Committee is on the record pace to complete their work today, and I hope I don't screw that up. I'll try to be brief and go through this. There have been questions not only from county boards, but other departments and a number of people in the public as to what the multiplier is and a little of how it works. The first page of what I handed out is the very beginning of about a 300-page act that describes the property tax system. In the first page it says that it should reflect fair cash value, and 1/3 fair cash value is determined by the Department B, the Department of Revenue for the state of Illinois, sales ratio study for the 3 most recent years preceding the assessment year. Although these might sound somewhat simple, the following 300 pages make it much more complex with a variety of who should do what and what if you don't, and exceptions and exemptions and a number of things that further complicate the system. I'll address a couple of brief questions that have been fairly common at the counter and phone calls that I've received, and maybe some of the same that you received, and I'll take questions following that. The second page is just some generic information that is not representative of Kankakee County or specific years. But one of the common questions that we have is, how can my assessment go up in a down year? As you saw in that first information, the Department of Revenue is looking at a 3-year trailing set of numbers. Sales ratio study for 2008 is based on 05, 6, and 7. What I've shown in this graph just shows generically how, with the dark diamonds being that each year individually median and the squares being the 3-year average, that with a trailing average of 3 years, not including the current year, seldom, if ever, are we going to intersect. If we do, it's more by accident when one is moving up as the other is moving down. Most years, since the real estate industry, the real estate sale prices over time tend to go up, for the most part, we're lagging behind. You'll see in a couple of places about year 7, about year 15, and again around year 21, you'll see that 3-year average goes over the top. Most of the time it's below, but there's a couple of examples there where it's very much like we're sitting in right now, where our 3-year trailing average has exceeded possibly what the current year is. That just demonstrates a little of how that can happen. Township and county multipliers are, there's provision for that. We see many of the townships do it on a neighborhood by neighborhood. Those aren't necessarily published. Those are things that they're looking at in trying to keep their township at that 33 1/3 level. They might see that certain neighborhoods are moving up or down at a different rate, and they may attempt to look at that. Where most of you are seeing it now is at a township level. Township multipliers are applied possibly by the supervisor of assessment, which has been done this year, and by the board of review. which I believe has been done once in the last 20 years. Those township assessments, multipliers that you've seen were a result of my application of those before notices went out. Board review, if they see fit, may do it before they finish their work, probably in March. From that point, multipliers are potentially added on a county-wide basis by the state of Illinois. Part of that, going back to that initial part of the statute, that 33 1/3 target that we're all looking to do, to a certain extent, if it's not done at a township level, it gets done theoretically at a supervisor level. If it doesn't get done or doesn't quite happen correctly, or that the board review sees fit to make large reductions, might cause that multiplier to be added. And if it doesn't get done at any of those levels or doesn't get done correctly, it gets done at a state level. With anything, if we're using a multiplier and just adding a flat rate across the board, isn't necessarily the fairest. Just like you dealt with here in budgets, at some point you said, we're going to cut 4% or we're going to add 3%. Some departments might say, I need more or less. But that is a fair way of doing it. Some would argue it's not the fairest. The same is true with the multipliers. On the next page where you can see numbered 1 through 5 across the top, this is just using an example. Ratios are determined, when I talk about that 33 1/3, by comparing the level of assessment to the sale price. You'll see in the example here across the top, we have $150,000 properties. And what their assessment was on the third line, 2 lines below that, across, and then the ratio is just that, the ratio between those two numbers. 33 1/3 being the target. A multiplier then might be added to try to equalize that. Multiplier in number 1 is 14.9%, multiplier being added to bring that up to that 1/3, 33 1/3 level. Number 2 was right on the money. So that shows where EAV, equalized assessed value, is showing what the multiplier did as established township by township in those 5 townships to bring it in line with that 33 1/3. And I just used one other line just to show what that means in terms of tax dollars. That means everybody with a $150,000 property, could be a house, could be a factory, could be a commercial building, could be vacant ground, is each paying $400. Another way of addressing multipliers in the bottom half is using the example of, and this is what the state would do if it wasn't done on a township level, is they would apply it county-wide and say the 32.33 is the median level. We're just going to add 3.1% to everyone. That would make an adjustment, and you can see the one that was correct in Township 2 is now over. The one in Township 4 that was under happened to get there just about right. And the others, if they were high to begin with, or even higher, those that were low or maybe somewhere closer to the beginning, to where they should be. Applying the tax rate, you can see what that would do to those $150,000 properties. They would have all different tax bills for potentially very similar valued properties. And by the way, if you add up all 5 of them, above or below it, it works out exactly the same number. So it doesn't affect the tax levy. It doesn't affect the value. So from the county's perspective, it's just a way of equalizing that valuation. It's not a revenue producer to the county if there's a multiplier added. Your levy, which is set completely independent of value, whether I put on a multiplier or the state puts on a multiplier, is not going to increase. And if we just say, well, we don't want any multipliers, that makes people mad, it just means the rate potentially is going to go up. And it doesn't help at all with equalization. That's just kind of a quick example with some numbers that might be helpful in that. The last thing, the last 2 pages, I just gave a little bit of a history of what multipliers have been. Going back to '89, it shows a township by township. You'll see a couple of places where we have multi-townships. Yellowhead Sumner, for our purposes, is treated as one township. There's one assessor, Mantino Rockville the same, and Essex Salina. This shows historically what multipliers have been, and I guess the 2 things that I'm wanting to point out here. One is multipliers are nothing new. We've had them all over the county for a long time. Sometimes they've been double-digit numbers. Probably the more important thing to mention to this committee is that if you look at the bottom, the 3-year average. That 3-year average that we're looking at there is the number that the state is looking at. We need to be at 33 1/3. To give us a little bit of room, 1% plus or minus that, which is about 32.99 to about 33.68, I believe it is. If we fall within that range, they do not issue the state does not issue a countywide multiplier. So there's a little bit of room in there to accommodate decreases that might happen as a result of court cases, property tax appeal, or board of review. And although the system is designed with some exact numbers in it, it's not designed to be perfect at every level all the way across. So there's a little bit of room in there. You can see that 3-year average. Again, that would be, excuse me, that 3-year trailing average. And the 2 things I wanted to point out, there were 2 times that in the last 20 years that the county has not arrived in that range. One year was in 2002, and the preliminary number was 33.85. The county would have received a multiplier of 0.9846, which would have been a reduction across the board for the whole county. In reviewing things at that time, the supervisor of assessment and board review worked together and felt like there was probably one place that we were over the top a little bit more than the others. And that resulted in a 0.99 multiplier being applied only in Kankakee Township. So the state did not give us a countywide multiplier that year, because although that didn't bring us to a perfect 33 1/3, it brought us within the range that they did not issue a multiplier. The other year was 1997 that I draw your attention to, and we ended up with a 32.77. If the state issues a multiplier, they don't issue just enough to get us in the range. They bring us right to the 33 1/3. In that year, the state issued a multiplier of 1.71%, and that was established and applied countywide. And that brought us to the 33 1/3. That's just a brief history of what multipliers have been. We are required by statute to hit within a certain range. And beyond the state stepping in and doing that, if it's outside of a certain range, it actually costs us some money at the county level. There's a reimbursement of half of my salary by getting in the right range. The state does not reimburse that annual amount if we don't hit that range on our own. So there's some importance financially to the county to get in that range as well.
Any questions? Jim?
I think when you come up with this multiplier and go to the state with it, do you take into consideration any of the local assessors' advice?
Yes.
I understand ours, asked you not to raise our multiplier, but did anyway.
Well, do I listen? Yes, to a certain extent. I need to do that. In some jurisdictions, they have their own township-wide sales study that the state has done. This last year, based on the 3-year study, the state showed that our county needed to move about 6.5% in total. Those individual sales studies that were done for townships that had enough sales in them have their own sales studies. Some of those showed that theirs needed to move 8% or more. as a group, the townships moved about 2.5%, which, as I cranked out the numbers in October, once they all turned everything into me, to be honest, I was somewhat horrified to find out that we were that far off, because they had been given individual as well as collective numbers back in June and July as to where we were and what the state's 3-year average was. So at that point, it needs to get equalized. And as you can see with those across-the-board multipliers, they're not necessarily fair in all ways, but if I gave no multipliers to anybody, the state would come in and give, in this case, about a 3.5% multiplier, and those that had raised 8% would get another 3.5% on top of that. Those that did nothing would still get 3.5%. And so for large jurisdictions, for the most part, these multipliers you'll see that I issued this year were nice round numbers. If somebody, based on the numbers, needed a 5.3, they got a 1.05. So I was able to round down and give the benefit of the doubt to everyone. In a couple that had in larger jurisdictions, I gave choices of we can put it all in residential or we can spread it against all property, which just pushes residential harder and leaves others without a multiplier, which I don't know that that's necessarily fair to pick and choose who gets multipliers.
Any other questions? Thank you, Steve. Seeing nothing else, is there any old or new business? A motion would be in order. Well, Steve McCarty's going to say something just before you.
Real quick. Turn him on. 14, please. I've had a lot of phone calls. One thing I did forget for explanation was some numbers coming out about landfill expense or legal fee expense related to that. I just want to explain to the board that that's probably been one of the most FOIA'd and asked about questions in the last 6 or 7 years, probably in county history. And depending on how it's asked is usually how it's answered. So there could be 30 numbers out there for various reasons, just because of, you know, angles or at the time or, you know, whatever the situation was. So, you know, the number that was in the editorial, the 1.4 million total in fighting, and then the million, just over a million, there's 63,000, was a specific question asked about a specific, you know, part of the entire thing. You know, so depending on how it's looked at or how it's approached, yeah, you could probably come up with any types of numbers. So, you know, I have explained that to some board members that called me, and I thought, you know, finance committee, I don't know if that rings a bell. Any questions? You know, I guess I wanted to explain if there are other numbers, there could be a lot of reasons why there's other numbers, and the way it was asked to get to is how it's answered a lot of times. So, you know, and there could be more numbers show up, you know, by the time the board meeting hits. So, because there are some FOIAs and things that have happened, you know, in the last couple of weeks. So, I just wanted to, you know, just re-explain at least the finance, you know what I mean? You know, that things are answered the way they're asked, you know, specifically.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Moved by Mr. Arsenault. Second by Mr. Washington. Would that be to adjourn, or was that something else?
Adjourn.
To adjourn. All right. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
That was easy. Pulled it off.